Castle Crashers is a side-scrolling beat-em-up that released back in 2008 on Xbox Live Arcade, seeing a PlayStation 3 release a couple of years later. A remastered version hit the Xbox One in 2015, with a few new features in tow, and it's this version that will release on the Nintendo eShop this week. Does the game hold up after all these years? I'm Glenn for SwitchUp, thank you to the developers for the review copy, and now, let's find out. You choose your knight at the start of the game, each with their own power, which is usually tied to an element. Once the action starts, you must clear the screen of all enemies before being able to move on, in typical beat-em-up fashion, and you have a number of moves at your disposal in order to help you do this. First you have your basic light attack, performed by pressing the Y button. There is also a heavy attack, which can be performed by pressing X. Defeating enemies will earn you gold, and this can be spent in various shops that you will come across on your travels. The shops will sell a number of items, including weapons, but there are also health potions that you can stock up on and use whenever needed. Any items you do acquire can be cycled through by pressing the L button and then used with a press of A. As well as buying weapons, you will discover them strewn across the levels at times too. Each one has its own stats that will affect the damage output you are producing, and any that you acquire will be collected by the blacksmith, and you can visit him and change to one of these weapons via the overworld map screen at any time. As well as the primary weapon, you will unlock a secondary weapon, and the use of this will be assigned to your A button. It's not all about hitting things though, and you will need to block enemy attacks at times, particularly when the archer units arrive, and a press of the ZL button will see your knight raise their shield and defend themselves. You can jump with a press of B, and this will come in handy for aerial attacks. As alluded to earlier, there is an overworld map screen to travel around, and levels are accessed through this. The beat-em-up action itself is fun and fast-paced. You get quite a few enemies thrown at you at once, and you can play with up to 4 players in both local and online. Gold is not shared between players, so you'll want to be quick and nab it before someone else does, adding a slightly competitive edge to a cooperative game, which is always fun. It does feel a little at times as if the game was made for co-op, especially due to the sheer abundance of enemies that use ranged weapons. When playing in single player, it can be difficult to effectively manage this, with projectiles sometimes coming from every conceivable angle. It doesn't ruin the game, far from it, but it does lead to your health bar evaporating at times. Boss battles are fairly frequent, and these are very enjoyable. Learning the bosses' patterns and plotting their downfall was a lot of fun, and the bosses were tough but fair. Every time you defeat an enemy, you will gain experience, and reaching a certain amount will see you level up. Leveling up will grant you skill points that you can put into 4 areas of your character in order to shape them to your particular playstyle. The 4 areas are strength, defense, magic and agility. Putting points into an area will improve your character's stats in that area, as you would expect, although there is another advantage with regard to the magic skill point, as putting points into magic will also unlock new spells. Holding down ZR will activate magic, and once you have learnt a spell, pressing the appropriate button whilst holding down ZR will use it. For example, ZR and A will perform a magic projectile, whereas ZR and B will perform a magic jump. Your magic meter will decrease when used, but this fills back up over time. The rate at which it increases depends on your magic proficiency as per your skill points. Finally, Castle Crashers features a pet orb system. Every so often you will encounter a small creature that you can befriend by touching them. They will then follow you and assist you in your quest. Each one has their own ability, and you can visit the pet arc to swap to any of the pets that you have found at any time. Some of the abilities include finding hidden fruit in trees, a source of health replenishment, and bringing them to you, or making it easier for you to swim in rough waters. What I especially liked about this feature was that sometimes the pet is allied with a boss and will join you once you have defeated their current trainer. I thought this was a nice touch. Something that I found a little odd was that when playing in local multiplayer, only player 1's progress is saved in terms of their skill points and character level. This means that when you go to continue your game, the other players will be at a disadvantage as their character will be weaker. There is the option to play in local wireless mode, which I assume would circumnavigate this problem, but of course this would call for everyone to have their own Switch plus the copy of the game. I did attempt to try an online mode for the purposes of this review, but sadly I could not find a game to join. Another slight negative is that you must finish a full chapter before exiting the game, otherwise your progress will not be saved. However, it's never made abundantly clear when a chapter ends. Some levels link directly into another, whereas others call for you to move to the next space on the map. A couple of times I quit out after what I assumed was the end of a chapter, only to have to replay a couple of stages on my return. This could have been made a lot clearer. As well as story mode, there are 2 other game modes, one exclusive to this remastered version. Arena mode is a basic survival mode as you attempt to survive each new wave of enemies, whereas Back Off Barbarian is new to the remastered game and is a party game that's usually trying to avoid the barbarians by following the on-screen prompts to move around a grid. It took me a while for my brain to comprehend what was being asked of it because the directional prompts do not necessarily correlate with the way you want to move. It was a fun distraction for a little while, if nothing else. Gameplay has that classic beat 'em up feel, be it in single or multiplayer, and scores 16 out of 20, whilst controls are simple and extremely easy to use, and they score 17 out of 20. Castle Crashers uses a hand-drawn art style, with this remastered version improving the quality of the textures over the original and running at 60 frames per second. The game world has a whimsical feel to it which is brought through wonderfully due to the detailed animations of the characters, friend and foe alike. Lead artist on the project, Dan Paladin, cited River City Ransom as one of his inspirations for the art style, particularly in regard to the facial expressions of characters when getting hurt, and this definitely comes across in the over-the-top grimaces and bulging eyes on display whenever your character takes a whack. The game's use of gore sees decapitations aplenty and enough of the red stuff to make both Itchy and Scratchy blush, but this is all done in an over-the-top cartoonish way and can be turned off in the options menu if this is not to your liking or if you are playing with younger companions. Backgrounds make good use of parallax scrolling, and I really enjoyed how they used much softer, delicate outlines for the backgrounds, or no outlines at all, which was in stark contrast to the very bold and deliberate black outlines of the characters or objects in the foreground, coupled with the use of pale colours for backgrounds, again against the much bolder colours of the foreground objects, made for a very clean and crisp aesthetic. I also liked how enemies appeared on screen at times. Rather than just walking on, they would scale a wall with a ladder or crash through windows. Sometimes though, a stylistic choice meant that the backgrounds obscured the view of the action a little too much. Perhaps a layer of transparency for these foreground obstructions would have been a good idea at these times. The music for the game was actually created by Newground users, with over 20 individuals contracted by the behemoth to make the tracks, with Dan Paladin creating 2 of the tracks himself. It's a mix of different styles ranging from zany and action-packed to intense and grandiose. It works very well, and I loved how each level had its own feel, and the music certainly enhanced the experience. Visuals are striking due to bold and colourful characters, and a more muted but equally as effective use of colour in the background, and scores 17 out of 20, whereas audio features a great mix of songs from a variety of artists and also scores 17 out of 20. Castle Crashers Remastered costs $14.99, €14.99, or the slightly higher £15.29, and for this price you get 12 chapters within the story mode, each containing between 2 to 6 levels, in-game achievements, the arena mode, and the new Barbarian minigame. There are a number of different characters to choose between, and the multiplayer modes both online and local. Being based in the UK, it's a shame that the price works out higher than other regions, but it must be said that you are getting a good amount of content for your money irrespective of your region. Some may feel this is too high for a remaster of an 11-year-old game with just a few improvements, and if you have played the game before, this may be something to think about, but judged on its own merits as a new Switch game, value gets 17 out of 20. To conclude, Castle Crashers Remastered is a fine beat 'em up and certainly takes its place at the top table for its genre on the eShop. Whether the additional elements of higher textures and a new game mode will be enough for people that own the original to purchase this slightly enhanced version is of course a personal choice, but as a standalone game and the only way to play Castle Crashers on a Nintendo console, it's well worth picking up for anyone with a love of beat 'em ups or looking for some fun multiplayer action. Castle Crashers Remastered gets a SwitchUp score of 84%. Thank you everyone as always for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do remember to leave a like if you did. A quick thank you as always to our Patreons for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.